Hey everybody, welcome back to my videos. My name is Eric McGrew with Elevated Office Podcast and Eric's Tree Service in Montrose, Colorado. Today I am doing the first of a series of live videos. I got so much response yesterday when I announced that I was going to do these that I'm actually just going to start doing them today. Hey Tie-Dyed Climber, what is up? I know it's a weird time of day and stuff. I have a day off because, well, my heating grid on my diesel, when I plugged it in the other day, the plug caught on fire, shot out like a 4-inch flame, and now I've got to send the truck in and I can't get it cranked because it's so cold out here, these old diesels. Hey Lumberjack, what's up? Hey all things arborist. So today we are going to jump right into it, and what I think is important, hey Mighty Mower Stump Grinding, The thing I think is really important is for you to understand, for newer climbers, the guys who have been climbing for a while, you guys all know this. It's that climbing isn't quite as straightforward as a lot of people think. Like a lot of new climbers that I meet, they think, oh, well, you just throw your line in the tree, you get up there, and it's not that hard. Truth of the matter is anybody can climb a tree. Anybody can climb it vertically, up and down as well. The difference there, of course, is that it becomes a bit more of a challenge when you're actually trying to... Manny Nugs, what is up? Hey, everybody. Thanks for stopping. I'm just trying to get through and answer questions you guys might have as we go along. So I don't mean to disregard you guys. But so when you really get into work positioning for arborist work, and when you are working on getting out to large sprawling branches. I mean, this is a small locust behind me. Let me see if I can get it a little bit more in the concept here. Hey, Gary. It's not nearly as hard on this tree as it would be like a large sprawling tree, right? So, before you get started climbing, if that's what you want to do or if that's what you think you want to do, hey Weaver, nice to have a sponsor with me all the time. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. We're talking about how people should view climbing if they're getting into climbing. So just know that climbing isn't quite as basic as you throw a rope in the tree and you just climb up it. That's the easiest part of climbing for an arborist, right? People often talk about the chainsaw work. Hey, Calaric, what's up, man? Calaric, sorry. And chainsaw work's hard too, but it's really about positioning yourself in the tree and getting to where you need to be in the tree. If you have enough strength and balance where you are stationed, then the rest of it becomes much more, feasible for you. And that's the biggest challenge I see is people jump into climbing thinking that it's, basically vertical. And most of what we do as an arborist, hey, what's up, Arborist 67? Most of what we do as an arborist in the tree is actually not vertical, unless, of course, you're doing like very specific trees. Aspen trees typically are pretty vertical. If you're going to be doing like pine trees, a lot of that, even though large pines, you have to get out on the tips if it's over a house and remove it off of, over the house in a way that's not going to damage anything and that kind of stuff. So, thinking about it in the terms of what it really is helps. So that's where all of this that we're going to be talking about in this series of live videos comes into play, because what occurs in the tree has a lot to do, or what will occur in the tree should have a lot to do with how you're going to set yourself up for climbing. And each person has their own way, each person has their own preferences, so I don't mean to say what I'm saying is law. That's not it. We're not going over the ANSI standards. You need to look at the ANSI book and figure that out. You need to look at whatever OSHA standards there are for you if that's what you're interested in. But what you do need to think about is looking at this tree. How am I going to get out to this edge over here that's super, super spindly and get that work done in a safe manner? So with that being the case, there's another aspect to climbing that often seems to be overlooked a little bit. You hear a lot of people talk about work positioning, and work positioning is extremely important for safety. but not all work positioning is life support. And that's where I think a little bit of confusion or just lack of conceptual thought goes into play. For instance, if you are out on these long spindly, hey, what is up? Thanks for joining. If you're out on these long spindly tips and you put your work positioning lanyard around those tips on those branches, is that life support? What would you say? Just curious, anybody who's listening. If you put now this is a locust, a honey locust, so it is a strong tree, but those are about 2 inches in diameter. So I'm 230 pounds. Hey, tree guy, 831. I'm 230 pounds with all my gear on. If I put my secondary tie-in point around that as a life safety, is that sufficient for me? Do you guys have any answers? Just seeing what you guys think. Right, no, Gary, you are right. Can it be good work positioning? Yeah, it can be. In fact, I use it all the time for work positioning. It gives just enough friction on your harness to keep you, your saddle, to keep you in the orientation you need to be so that you're not fighting a counter rotation in your balance and that kind of stuff to make a cut, right? But, so here's the thing though. If you tie your second tie-in point, your lanyard out to those small branches out there, are you technically tied in twice? Technically. What do you guys think? So it's a 2-inch branch. Go to the top tie-in point and get out on the limb and use side strop as work positioning. Very good. Okay. Thing is, what if you cut your main line? Right, tree guy, 831. So the technical standards that you read about being tied in twice aren't just for work positioning, which a lot of people say, well, I'm tied in twice. That's good enough. Exactly, tie-dyed. It depends on how it's connected, right? So if you have a lot of redirects going on and a lot of other things, possibly. Right? So please understand, I'm not trying to talk about rules here. I'm talking about principles. Because as tie-dyed climber mentioned, like Gary is saying, you're only tied in once. So there's a difference very clearly between what is considered a actual life safety second tie-in versus just a work positioning tie-in. Okay? And that's very important to consider because a lot of guys, they ask me all the time, why am I climbing with a double rope system? Not doubled, not MRS, but double rope system. So 2 systems, two lines that are separate. And a lot of times I get asked about why I climb with 2 lanyards. Now, I want it to be understood. I'm not saying you have to climb with 2 lanyards, nor am I saying that you have to climb with 2 ropes attached to you. That's just methods that I commonly use. Why? Because that allows me to use my lanyard as a work positioning device, even on things that are less than sufficient for health or life safety. Hey, Bear Valley, what is up? Wearing your jacket, bro. What's not true, Fincharb? Sorry. I hope I didn't misstate something. Please let me know. I'm curious what you are. Yeah, no, you're right. I'm not talking about touching the ground, Finch. I'm just talking about fall restraint in a tree for life safety. So the difference is so Finch has a very good point. Not all life safety systems have to reach the ground, just like your lanyard most likely will not reach the ground, but it is a life safety system. Oh, okay, Finch, thanks. So, but a lanyard out on a very, very, very small branch will possibly work, depending on the tree, for work positioning, orienting you, keeping you balanced. But if you were to cut your main tie-in point, it would not possibly, depending on the tree, depending on the size, whatever, support you in your life, right? So those are points that I often find are very kind of misconstrued. Hey, Bonnie. Todo para el arborista. What is up? So keep that in mind. That's why I climb personally, and this is just a personal preference, with two lanyards often. I don't always climb with two lanyards. I often just climb with one. But it depends on the tree and the kind of work that I'm doing, because the last thing I want to do is have my work positioning tied in to a very small union that keeps me oriented. I'm making good cuts, no problem, but I have an issue and I accidentally cut my climb line. Well, there's nothing to keep me from hitting the ground at that point, because most likely the part that I am tied into with my work positioning lanyard was not sufficient enough. Ah, really, Gary? That's interesting to know. So in the States, you don't have to have that. You do have to have two tie-ins that are sufficient to, or you're supposed to have two tie-ins that are sufficient to restrain you from fall. And then you have to consider how you're going to get down from there. It is highly recommended, by the way, for everybody to know that if you're climbing, you want a easy access point. Hey, GRR Barista. To get up and save you if something goes dramatically wrong, or that you can get down from, okay? So an interesting point that you might find is that a lot of battery, evidently. A lot of guys here do actually climb with a short line in the tree, and they tie a stopper knot at the end so it never touches the ground. It's just an easier line to carry around with them and set redirects with and things like that. Plus their lanyard, it just makes tree work a little bit easier for them. So this is just a good beginning to what we'll be talking about with lanyards, for instance. So here very soon I'll be doing another live video where I will be in the tree and you guys can make comments and ask questions about what I'm doing. That will allow me to get in the tree, make tie-in points, show you what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Once again, not saying that I'm the perfect trainer by any means. I don't claim myself to be. We're going to talk about concepts of what you might want to think about. Plus, we'll talk about redirects and what kind of redirects you can establish for good use. Yeah, Gary, I run a 20 foot. So 20 foot is around, I guess 20 foot is around 4 or 5 meter lanyard as well. And I use that often another point, I use my lanyard often with a secondary device on it, something like a zigzag or a rope runner, or somebody just traded me a helmet for a Hitchhiker 2, and I'll run the Hitchhiker 2 on it as a lanyard tender and also a SRT or SRS climbing device on my lanyard, right? So these are some concepts that we can definitely expound on. I think they need to be talked about a little bit more. I think it's overly simplified sometimes, and I see a lot of guys making decisions that it's their right to make, and technically they're following the rule of being tied in twice, but it doesn't seem like a very good judgment call to me, because where they're tied in wouldn't possibly support their life if they actually cut their main tie-in point, if that makes sense. So this is just a short introduction to the first live video that we're talking about the concepts of climbing. One of the biggest concepts also that I cannot understate is learning how to climb in a way that doesn't clutter you too much with hardware, but hey Liberty, what is up, but does actually allow you to reduce excessive fatigue on your muscles. So climbers often suffer from shoulder issues. They often suffer from torn and strained muscles. We suffer from tendonitis from repetitive use. Yeah, Gary, just a quick question. Do you use pulleys and camion savers? So yes, Gary, I do. It depends on the situation though. For instance, I don't climb MRS a ton. I usually only climb MRS for removals. We'll go into why I specifically do that in a future live video. But I do use them oftentimes. I do find for me, however, with the ropes that I run and the kind of devices that I use, so usually I'm running doubled rope system, or DDRT MRS, moving rope system, on an akimbo. It's just what I have that I like of all my devices. I'm not real big on using prusiks, even though I do know how to tie prusiks. I know how to use them. It's not my favorite device to use. And I have never climbed significantly on a zigzag, so I can't make much comment on that. I do agree that the pulleys help reduce strain. The challenge that I have with pulleys, unless you own like an ART rope guide, I think it's called, unless you have the ART rope guide, the pulleys tend to make friction savers more difficult to retrieve. So I tend to climb on a ring to ring adjustable friction saver over a pulley, if that makes any sense. Hey, Ranky, is that right? I'm sorry if I said that wrong, man. I appreciate you coming in and watching as well. So yes, I do climb on pulleys because it does reduce a lot of fatigue when it's sufficient for me to do so. So let me give you a real quick scenario on that. When I use a pulley for doubled rope system, or MRS, I will set a line at the top of a tree, work it all out on a pulley with my moving rope system for removing all the large branches and leads and whatnot, get back to the trunk, and then now I'm going to top out, or chunk down, block down the trunk. So the stem, whatever you want to call it. So I go back up to the top, I remove the pulley, I set up ring to ring friction saver in still DDRT or MRS. I come down to maybe, depending on the size of the yard and the size of the trunk, I will remove a 6 to 10 foot section. And then I can easily retrieve that upper tie-in point that's the choking friction saver at that point down to me, and then I can reset it and block it off. And even though I'm moving up and down a little bit, I don't need the pulley to make it efficient, if that makes any sense. So yeah, send me some pictures of it, Gary. I'd like to see what you're doing with that. So hope that kind of gives you guys an idea. We'll talk about some of that stuff in the future, but definitely know that to start with, the concepts of tree climbing that are very important are knowing that when you're actually tied in, you want to be securely tied in case you accidentally cut your line, not just technically tied in to something that won't support you if you have a bad accident. And that's not just cutting your line, but what if a tip breaks out or something like that? Is the secondary tie-in point going to hold you plus the weight of something? Potentially, right? So there's all these nuances to think about, and we'll talk about that stuff in a future video. Sorry that you're coming in now as I'm closing off, but thank you guys, and I will make advance notice for you guys as to when I'm putting up the next video. And some of my live videos will actually be on YouTube, so that everybody from Facebook and Instagram can watch more easily, and I will let you guys know when all that happens. So thanks everybody, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Be safe out there climbing.